He rolled forward, slow, quiet, unreadable. But the moment they laughed, something else awakened. What happens when you mock a veteran who once watched battlefields from the sky? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to show your support for our veterans. Jake McKinley's fingers moved with practiced ease, flipping open the carbon fiber armrest panel of his custom wheelchair. Beneath it, tucked in a padded compartment next to a small control screen, rested a black microdrone the size of a clenched fist. He wasn't planning to fly it today, not yet, but like any veteran worth his salt, Jake always kept his tools ready. The wheelchair hissed softly as it turned, pivoting on smooth axles reinforced with lightweight alloy. Jake guided himself back into the sunlit garage, a converted workspace lined with shelves of components, screens, and tools. Everything in here had a purpose, just like Jake had. Once. Back then, in the desert, he'd flown Predators and Reapers, eyes in the sky, 21 confirmed IED interdictions. He used to joke with the younger pilots, "Y'all play Call of Duty, I live it in real time." And then, one day, the sky came crashing down. It wasn't a direct hit. The enemy didn't get him with shrapnel or fire, no. It was indirect. A suicide drone. Ironic, he thought, that swept in low and detonated near the comms trailer. Jake had been inside. Now, he lived off base pensions and government tech grants, quietly nestled in the edge of a small Colorado town called Willow Ridge. He repaired things for neighbors, fixed broken radios for the kids, trained a few high school seniors on basic drone logic just to keep them out of trouble. But today he sensed something off the moment the bikes roared down Main Street. He heard them before he saw them. Deep, guttural engines, mufflers intentionally absent, a chorus of rebellion and rust. The sound bounced off the narrow storefronts like a dare. The town wasn't big enough for that kind of sound. Not anymore. Jake sighed, then clicked his joystick, rolling backward and parking himself just outside the garage. He didn't need to see them to know who they were. The first to appear was the leader, a tall, wiry guy with faded tattoos crawling up his neck and mirrored sunglasses that reflected everything and revealed nothing. Trey Blazer Maddox. Jake didn't know him personally, but he'd seen him around, heard the whispers. Ex-con, self-appointed president of a local biker crew that called themselves the Vultures. The Blazer pulled up in front of Sam's diner with a jerk of the handlebars, his boot dragging a spray of gravel as he kicked down the stand. Two more rolled up behind him. Rick Slug, Danner, a stocky brute with a permanent snarl, and Amber Red, Talbot, leathered up and sharp as a razor's edge. She hopped off her bike with practiced ease, her red braid swinging behind her like a whip. Blazer stretched, cracked his neck, and scanned the street like a predator on a new savanna. "This place got quieter," he muttered, his voice like cigarette smoke. Thin, rough, and used to commanding attention. "Too quiet. Let's wake it up." Slug let out a wet laugh and started lumbering toward the diner entrance, but Blazer caught his arm. "Nah, wait, what's that?" They'd spotted Jake now, a silhouette backlit in the glow of the garage light. Just a man in a chair, but something about how he sat there, still, upright, hands folded, didn't sit right. Red squinted. "Yo, is that the cripple guy who lives here? The war one?" Blazer smirked. "Yeah, that's him. Quiet type. Let's go say hi." Jake didn't flinch as the trio approached. He didn't back up either. His left hand rested near the touchpad panel. Not hovering, just present. Blazer was first to speak. "Nice ride, old man. Bet that baby cost the government a fortune." Jake's eyes flicked upward. "Cool. Patient. They invested wisely," he said. Red snorted. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jake's reply was slow, even, almost kind. "Means they knew I'd put it to good use." Slug stepped closer, looming. "You threatening us, chairboy?" "No." Jake turned his head slightly. "Not yet." There was a pause then, that subtle kind of stillness that only veterans notice, the moment before things tip, the moment before the dogs bite. Blazer leaned in, sunglasses lowered now, revealing two blue eyes that hadn't seen anything close to war. So, what, you some kind of tech wizard now? Gonna fly a toy at us? You a drone guy or something? Jake didn't blink. I was, he said. Was? Red mocked. Looks like now you're just a rust bucket with a tool set. Jake's hand moved gently, casually, toward the panel. And you're just noise, he said. But noise doesn't last. It fades. Slug laughed and slapped the side of the wheelchair. Let's roll him into the street, see how he drives without juice. Don't, Jake said sharply. The sudden edge in his voice made Slug pause. What'd you say? I said don't. That panel you just touched. You move it again, you'll trigger a recon scan. A what? Blazer chuckled. But Jake's fingers were already moving. The drone hatch opened with a faint hiss, and the air above Jake shimmered. A small black object hovered silently just 6 feet above the chair, spinning on its vertical axis. It made no sound, no beeps, no flashy lights, just cold precision. What the hell is that? Red whispered. Jake didn't answer. He was watching them now, not afraid, not angry, just watching. The drone adjusted its lens. Target acquisition, 3 figures. Facial mapping, 87% match to known profiles. 1 match, Maddox, Tray A, parole status, active. A barely audible chime confirmed the scan. You not in the desert anymore, soldier? Blazer sneered. This ain't Baghdad. Jake's smile was razor thin. No, he said, it's home. And here. I still protect what matters. And then, for the first time, he looked directly at Blazer. You want to test that? Silence again. The street behind them was empty now. The townsfolk had seen the bikes, heard the rumbles, and wisely decided to disappear for a while. But the drone didn't disappear. It hovered, waiting, watching. And Jake McKinley just waited too. Because sometimes you don't need to fight the way they expect. You just need to remind them that you still can. Blazer took 1 step back, not because he was scared, but because some ancient part of his instincts told him something wasn't right. His eyes flicked from Jake to the drone, then to Red and Slug, who suddenly didn't look as cocky as they had 5 minutes ago. The toy, Slug muttered, squinting at the little black orb in the sky. Jake said nothing. He didn't have to. The drone remained suspended, silent as a ghost, its single lens rotating slowly like a predator's eye scanning the perimeter. You some kind of spook? Blazer asked, trying to chuckle but failing. You Air Force, right? I've seen your kind. Thought you guys just sat in trailers playing with joysticks while real men fought on the ground. Jake's fingers moved again, this time swiping across the wheelchair's recessed touchscreen. The drone immediately responded. A soft beep echoed, barely audible, and the machine rose another 10 feet, then pivoted its angle toward the 3 bikers. A red dot blinked once, then vanished. Jake spoke for the first time in nearly a minute. Wrong again. I wasn't just playing with joysticks. I was tracking bomb makers, cartel couriers, foreign arms deals. I watched from the sky so others didn't have to die in the dirt. Slug took another step back. Man, this dude is nuts. Not nuts, Red muttered, watching the drone. Prepared. Blazer clenched his jaw. All right, enough of this. You think your flying camera's gonna scare us? Jake leaned forward slightly, his voice lowered, almost too soft to hear. No, he said, but the satellite feed it's pinging off of? That's a different story. He tapped the panel once more. You're bluffing. Jake's eyes never left Blazer's. If I was, you'd already be standing closer. Blazer hesitated again, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. He turned to Red, teaseled. In a chair. Look at him. Red didn't answer. Her focus was still locked on the hovering drone. Jake let the silence stretch before speaking again. This time, his tone was no longer firm. It was calm, almost reflective. You know what's funny? He asked. Back in Mosul, I watched guys just like you drive into town on junked-up motorcycles, screaming like wolves, waving rifles. You know how they ended up? Lasser smirked, but there was a twitch in his lip. "Where?" he asked. Jake nodded toward the drone. "Tag, track, then taken down." The air was thick now. Even the summer breeze seemed to retreat. Red finally spoke. "Let's just go, Blaze. This ain't worth it." Blazer turned sharply. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," she said, stepping backward. "I've seen enough." Slug followed her without hesitation. His earlier swagger had drained from his broad frame, replaced by the slow walk of a man suddenly aware he wasn't bulletproof. Blazer stayed a second longer, staring Jake down, trying to summon something that wasn't there anymore. He finally huffed and spat to the side. "This ain't over." Jake gave a slight nod. "No, it never is." Blazer turned and stormed off, barking at the others to fire up the bikes. Jake didn't move until they were gone, engines roaring down the narrow road like a pack of cowards fleeing a silent battlefield. When the sound finally disappeared over the ridge, he exhaled. His hand hovered over the panel. Then, with one fluid motion, he tapped "Stand by." The drone blinked, dropped down softly into its housing, and the panel hissed closed. Jake rolled back into the garage. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the solar inverter tucked in the back wall, powering his workshop with all the quiet dignity Jake had learned to live by. A life of simplicity, control, distance. He stared at the far wall, a cluttered bulletin board filled with photos, notes, and old base patches, a snapshot of his old crew, 32nd Operations Group, Balad Air Base. Another photo, a younger version of him, standing beside a Reaper drone, hand on the fuselage like it was a loyal dog. They'd called him Hawkeye back then, the man who never blinked. But time blinked, time moved on. It left Jake in a wheelchair in a small town, surrounded by people who had no idea what his hands had done or what he'd seen through his screens. He grabbed a rag from the bench, wiped his hands slowly, and looked over to the corner of the garage where a much larger drone chassis rested under a tarp. That one hadn't flown since the winter. But it could. His dog, Bravo, padded into the garage, then a gray-muzzled black lab with eyes as intelligent as any soldier. Jake reached out, ran a hand along his head. "Good boy. You still remember the old sounds, don't you?" Bravo sat obediently next to him, his ears twitching in the direction the bikers had gone. Jake stared into the open street, where the last echoes of engine growls faded into memory. Later that afternoon, Jenny Alvarez stopped by. She was in her mid-30s, ran the coffee shop 2 blocks down, and always made a point to check on Jake. She walked through the open garage door, holding a paper bag and a steaming cup. "Did I hear trouble earlier?" she asked, half smiling but with a trace of worry in her eyes. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Define trouble." "I saw the vultures on their way out. Looked like their tails were between their legs." Jake didn't answer immediately, just took the coffee and nodded his thanks. "You all right?" she asked, softer now. "I'm fine," Jake said, just reminding people that not all battles are fought in the open. Jenny tilted her head. "You did something, didn't you?" Jake smirked and sipped the coffee. "Just sat here, let them talk." She chuckled, sensing his refusal to go into detail. That was Jake, calm as a mountain and just as immovable. "Well," she said, "if they come back, you let me know. I'll grab the baseball bat from behind the counter." "I think we'll be all right," Jake said, "but thanks." Jenny paused by the edge of the door, looking back at him. "You ever gonna tell me what that thing is?" She gestured to the wheelchair panel. Jake just raised an eyebrow. "Would you believe me if I said it's my guardian angel?" Jenny smiled. "Only if it has wings." Jake looked back down at the sealed panel. Something like that. She left, and Jake was alone again. Just the soft humming of his tools and the quiet trust of Bravo by his side. He stared out into the horizon where the sun had begun to drift lower in the sky. There was a storm coming. Not the kind with rain, but one made of ego, engines, and wounded pride. Jake knew men like Blazer didn't take humiliation lightly, and he also knew they weren't done. But neither was he. Not by a long shot. Blazer hadn't slept. He sat in the back room of their makeshift clubhouse, a gutted-out auto repair shop on the edge of a forgotten service road. The others were out front, drinking, laughing too loudly, but Blazer was locked in silence, staring at a scorched burn mark on the concrete floor, left over from a night when one of them thought lighting a gas can for fun was a good idea. They'd laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. His boot tapped against the floor, an unconscious rhythm to match the flickering overhead light that buzzed without resolve. His knuckles were scraped from punching the workbench earlier, and his ego? That was the real wound. He had been mocked, not openly, but it had been there in the stillness, in the eyes of that old vet, a man in a wheelchair, making him, feel small, him and his crew, turned to cowards with nothing more than a whisper from a hovering ball of metal. Blazer growled low in his throat and pushed off the wall. Enough. That guy thought he was clever, playing war games from his porch like some backyard Rambo. He needed to be reminded how the world works when the rules are off. "Red," he barked as he stepped out into the main room. "Slug. Inside, now." Red looked up from her seat on the hood of an old Nova, a half-empty bottle of tequila dangling from her hand. "You wake up grumpy, or is this about the flying eyeball again?" Slug stopped mid-bite of a cold slice of pizza. "You still on that?" Blazer's jaw twitched. "We're not letting this slide. That freak embarrassed us, and I don't know what that thing was, but I'm betting it's illegal as hell." Red raised an eyebrow. "You gonna call the cops on a disabled vet, Blaze?" He shot her a hard glare. "No. I'm gonna do what we do. We roll back in, we wreck his little toy shop, and we make sure he knows who runs this county, vet or not." Slug looked unsure. "What if that drone was government grade? I mean, he wasn't bluffing, Blaze. You saw it." "And what? You scared of a camera on wings?" Blazer stepped closer, voice dropping to a snarl. "That old man's got no backup, no crew, just toys. We don't blink for toys." Red sighed, taking a swig. "All right, fine. But we do this clean. No one gets hurt. We go in, trash the place, let 'em stew in it." Blazer's lips curled. Deal. By nightfall, the plan was set. They'd ride in under darkness, no headlights until they were half a mile out, and sweep the street. Slug had brought bolt cutters. Red carried a signal jammer she'd used once to mess with a local tow yard, and Blazer had a tire iron tucked behind his seat like it was part of the bike. They weren't just going to break things, they were going to leave a message. Meanwhile, back in Willow Ridge, Jake sat inside his garage as Bravo lay stretched near the doorway, his tail twitching every few minutes. Jake had the drone charging silently behind him, but that wasn't what he was working on now. Spread across his workbench were parts, metal arms, sensors, a mini gyroscopic stabilizer, a project he hadn't touched in over a year. It had once been part of a demonstration unit for veterans therapy centers, an assistive drone that could be voice-activated and controlled without physical input. Now it had a new purpose. He wasn't naive. Blazer's eyes had said it all. Jake knew they'd come back, maybe tonight, maybe next week, but men like that didn't retreat for long. They regroup, they retaliate. He'd seen it overseas, again and again. So this time, he'd be ready for escalation. He glanced at Bravo. "If anything goes south," he said aloud, "you get under the table, all right?" Bravo blinked at him, that solemn canine way of understanding that didn't require words. The sun dipped below the horizon as Jake activated the last circuit. The prototype chirped. He let out a soft breath of relief. Then the signal dropped. It was subtle, barely a blink in the Wi-Fi icon on his workstation, a hesitation in the live camera feed from his mailbox sensor. Jake leaned forward. Another flicker. Then nothing. He tapped the screen. No response. He pulled open the side drawer, withdrew a backup receiver, and plugged it in. Still nothing. That was no accident. He turned his wheelchair toward the panel. Fingers moved fast now, urgent but controlled. The main drone lifted from its cradle, adjusting its altitude to the rooftop and switching to infrared mode. Just in time. Half a mile down the street, 3 motorcycles were moving without lights. Infrared picked them up instantly. Jake squinted. Same crew, same patterns. They were coming fast. He tapped a command. The secondary drone, older, louder, powered up, its rotors groaning but steady. Jake moved to the corner of the garage and pressed a button near the frame. The garage door began to shut, but only halfway. Exactly as planned. Outside, Blazers saw the half-shut door and grinned. Open enough to squeeze in, idiot didn't even lock up. Red wasn't so sure. Why's he got it open at all? Think he's baiting us? Doesn't matter, we're not here for chess, we're here for war. They cut the engines a few houses down and rolled the rest of the way, pushing the bikes quietly along the curb. Once they reached Jake's place, Slug broke away to cut the power junction box, while Red stayed near the road to monitor. Blazer moved to the garage door. He stepped underneath it, scanning the space. Quiet, too quiet. He moved forward, and the overhead lights flared on. Blazer froze. Then came the voice, calm, clear, and just the slightest bit amused. "You really thought I wouldn't see you coming?" Blazer spun. Jake's voice came from a speaker mounted high on the garage's rafter beam. His chair wasn't even visible. Just the floating drone, now centered above the workspace, its red eye trained dead on Blazer. "Where are you?" Blazer barked. "Watching," Jake replied. "Recording. Streaming, actually. Got a whole feed beaming to the sheriff's inbox right now." Blazer cursed and reached for the tire iron. The drone moved. Not away. Downward. Fast. Blazer dove as the drone buzzed inches above him, then rose again, positioning itself between him and the exit. Outside, Red heard the commotion and grabbed her jammer, but as she stepped forward, her own phone lit up with an alert. "Sheriff Cooper, all units, 1062 at 145 Willow Ridge. Suspects on foot. Proceed with caution." Red's stomach sank. Jake hadn't just called for help. He'd called in everything. She turned to yell for Slug, but the second drone now buzzed down the street toward her, not armed, but glowing with strobe lights and broadcasting live through a body cam. She saw herself on the tiny screen, face front and center. Back in the garage, Jake finally rolled into view, his eyes locked on Blazer, who now stood, breathing hard, jaw tight with rage. "Looks like I win again," Jake said. Blazer gritted his teeth. "This ain't over." "No," Jake said, "but it's getting closer." The cruiser's sirens didn't scream through the night. They rolled in low and urgent, more a warning than a declaration. Red had already vanished into the shadows behind a dumpster when the first patrol car slid into view. Slug was gone too, but Blazer stood defiant in the garage, staring down Jake like a man who'd been stripped of everything but his pride. Jake didn't flinch. He sat there in the center of the garage, the drone hovering silently overhead, casting an oblong shadow over them both. The red eye on the machine blinked every few seconds, calm, methodical, recording everything. Deputy Ward was the first on the scene. A broad-shouldered man in his 40s, he stepped from his cruiser with one hand near his holster, the other raised in a show of caution. "Evening, Jake," he called out. "What's going on here?" Jake kept his eyes on Blazer. "Had some unexpected company, Ward." Ward glanced at the drone, then at the scuff marks on the floor, the faint smell of ozone in the air. "Blazer Maddox," Ward said with a sigh. "I should have figured." Blazer scoffed, took a step back. "It ain't done nothing. Just talking." "Sure," Jake said flatly. "Right up until you tried to swing that tire iron." Ward looked between them. "Put it down, Maddox." Blazer let the iron clatter to the floor with exaggerated disinterest. "Happy?" "No," Jake replied, "but I'm patient." Ward approached slowly, eyes flicking to the drone overhead. "Jake, you want to press charges?" Jake didn't answer right away. He looked down at his control pad, then back at Blazer. "No," he said finally. "Not yet." Blazer's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means you get one shot to walk away before the law takes over, Jake said. You don't take it. I won't stop them next time. Ward studied Jake's face. You sure? Jake nodded. I've got what I need. Ward reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. Maddox, here's the official notice. Any harassment, property damage, loitering, trespassing, you violate any of those, and next time it's not a warning. Blazer snatched the card and turned to leave, every inch of him bristling with barely contained fury. As he passed Jake's chair, he paused, voice low. You think you've won? Jake didn't look at him. You're still here, aren't you? Blazer sneered and stalked out of the garage, mounting his bike and tearing off into the night before the backup patrols even arrived. Ward gave Jake a long look before heading out, too. Be careful, Jake. Guys like that, they don't forget. Jake waited until the cruisers were gone, until Bravo padded over and rested his head on Jake's lap, the tension easing out of the dog's body in slow, trusting exhales. Then he locked the garage door and started preparing for the inevitable. He didn't know exactly how Blazer would retaliate, but he knew it wouldn't be small. 2 nights later it came. Jake had just finished his coffee when the power went out. No warning, no storm, just darkness. But Jake had built redundancies. The garage kicked on battery backup, the internal monitors glowed to life, and on the main screen, a motion alert pulsed in red. He pulled up the live feed. 2 silhouettes, moving fast, one on the roof, one cutting through the alley. Not the whole gang, just 2. Smaller strike team. He tapped the drone command and opened the encrypted frequency. And then he heard it. The sound of glass breaking. Not at the garage. At the front of the house. His house. Jake's hands moved faster than they had in years. He wasn't just reacting, he was planning, adapting. The drone launched from the second garage panel, banking hard left to loop around the front of the house. There he saw them. Slug, his form hunched in the moonlight, holding what looked like a crowbar, and Red, mask pulled up over her face, her fingers working on the side panel to Jake's power box. Jake tapped the mic. Wrong house. Red froze. But Slug turned. The drone flashed its light. Red ducked. Slug swung the crowbar and missed, as the drone zipped upward, darting like a wasp into the night sky. Jake toggled the sequence. The front floodlights lit up, bright, blinding, the kind of light you can't look into without shielding your eyes. Red cursed and tried to run, but slipped on the gravel. Slug yanked her up. The drone dropped low again, not to attack, but to follow. Jake didn't need to stop them tonight. He just needed to mark them. With one button, he enabled Paint Protocol. The drone's undercarriage popped open, and a thin stream of UV reactive dye shot out in a tight line across Slug's back and Red's arm. It was invisible to the naked dye, but Jake's cameras would see it for days. They didn't make it to their bikes. Bravo's barking from inside the house spooked them, and by the time they realized how exposed they were, Jake had already activated the sprinkler system, modified to mist the same compound they'd just been tagged with. They scrambled, cursed, vanished into the night. Jake sat back in the chair and closed his eyes for a moment. His breathing was steady, his heart rate normal, no adrenaline spike, no fear. Only purpose. The next morning he made 2 calls. The first was to Sheriff Cooper. The second was to the local American Legion post. By noon there were 6 other veterans sitting around Jake's garage. One of them, Carl Monroe, was Army EOD, retired and twice divorced, with a temper for injustice and a toolbox full of creative deterrents. Another, Cindy Archer, had been a Navy intelligence analyst who now worked in cybersecurity. She brought coffee, 2 laptops, and an attitude. Within an hour they had a plan. Not revenge. Resilience. We make the house untouchable, Cindy said, typing rapidly. Cameras, alerts, fail-safes. You'll know if a squirrel sneezes within 50 feet. Carl grinned. And if they touch your drone again, I've got some flash canisters from the old days, not lethal, but they'll see God for a second." Jake chuckled. "This wasn't your fight." "It is now," Carl said. "Your family." The other vets nodded, old bonds, silent understanding. By dusk, Jake's property was a fortress, disguised under flower beds and porch lights, but a fortress nonetheless. He knew Blazer would try again. He was counting on it. Because this time, he wasn't just defending his home. He was drawing a line, and when Blazer crossed it, because men like him always did, Jake would be ready. And he wouldn't be alone. 3 days of silence had passed, and Jake McKinley knew better than to trust it. He'd lived through operations where the enemy went dark just long enough to make you lower your guard. Back then it was insurgents hiding in the back alleys of Fallujah pretending the fight was over. Here it was a biker gang pretending. They were smart enough to back off. Jake didn't believe it for a second. His systems were live 24 hours now. Not just the drone patrols, but layered camera feeds, heat sensors buried in the front yard, and a Bluetooth-activated alarm grid that pinged his chair if anything crossed the perimeter. It was enough to make the sheriff's department nervous, especially when Cindy explained it to them like they were junior cadets. But Sheriff Cooper had given him the nod, the quiet kind of nod that said, "Just don't tell me about the stuff I'd have to report to the feds." Bravo lay in the garage, more alert than usual. Age had made him slower, but his loyalty had never dulled. He paced by the door more often now, sniffing at the air, like he knew something was off-kilter in the world. Jake sat at the workbench, tinkering with an old pair of field glasses modified to detect movement over thermal bloom. It was busy work. He wasn't expecting them to come in broad daylight, but he needed to keep his hands busy. Across the street, Carl sat in his pickup, a thermos of black coffee beside him and a Springfield rifle across his lap, not loaded, just in view, enough to give pause. Cindy had left a decoy laptop on the porch swing, baiting anyone foolish enough to think Jake's security began and ended inside his garage. They weren't playing games anymore. And then came the call. Cindy's voice popped into Jake's earpiece. Calm. Too calm. Thermal just picked up 3 heat signatures moving into the south tree line. One's low to the ground. That's probably red. Looks like they're splitting up. Jake clicked his control panel open. Initiate passive recon. Activate Sentinel 1 and 2. Done. From under the roof eaves, 2 drone units launched like quiet birds, gliding into the treetops without a sound. Jake's screens lit up with thermal overlays, 3 figures, exactly as Cindy had said. One of them had a bat. Another had a small, boxy item that Jake recognized immediately. A signal jammer. He leaned forward in his chair. "This is it," he said under his breath. Cindy's voice was sharper now. "They're circling to the east, moving slow." "They're not here to talk," Jake said. Carl chimed in on the comms. "Want me to let them know they've been spotted?" Jake considered it. "No, let them get close." "Copy." He clicked a tab on his touchscreen. The interface switched from overhead view to ground-based proximity. A grid overlay tracked pressure points on the lawn, mapping impact weights. It was more sensitive than it needed to be. Originally developed for wildlife tracking in Afghanistan. Now it was watching for trespassers on his lawn. Red was the first to make contact. She crouched behind the edge of Jake's fence, peeking between slats with a handheld flashlight covered in red tape. Old school. Jake admired that. Didn't make her less dangerous. From above, Sentinel 1 hovered, low, cloaked by the dark canopy. It zoomed in on her face, matched her to the UV-tagged profile from days earlier, confirmed. Target 1, Amber Talbot, a.k.a. Red. Confirmed match, 96.3%. Then came the second. He was moving slower, heavier, his breathing visible on thermal as short, ragged bursts. He was clutching something. Not a bat this time. It looked like a crowbar duct-taped to a taser. Jake whistled softly. Clever. The third came last. Not Blazer. That surprised him. The new guy was taller, bulkier, face partially obscured by a ski mask and sunglasses. No record matched on facial scan. Unknown. But he was moving with confidence. His posture said former military, or at least someone trained. Jake watched them converge on the east flank. Cindy's voice was calm, but edged with steel now. "Want me to call the sheriff?" "Not yet." Carl broke in. "I'm itching for a reason." Jake's fingers tapped commands on his screen, each stroke methodical. A map of his property lit up in quadrants. Then he toggled Zone 3, active. Outside, under the porch, a low hum began to vibrate. Pressure sensors were warming up. "Let them breach," Jake said. "We let them believe they're inside before the net drops." "They've cleared the gate," Cindy said. "Slog just past Zone 3. Jake tapped a button. From beneath the grass, a strobe of blue light burst up, short, dazzling. It lasted only a second, but Slug dropped to one knee, stunned. Red jumped back, spooked, but the bigger man, unknown target, grabbed Slug by the arm and yanked him back to his feet. They kept moving. Jake's heart rate ticked up, not from fear. He clicked to Zone 4. As the trio reached the side of the house, 2 cameras mounted on fake bird feeders rotated toward them. Their LED eyes flashed once, recording, storing, identifying. "Tell me when they're at the panel," Jake said. "They're close," Cindy answered. "Red's reaching for the power box again." "You know?" Jake tapped the final command. The drone above dropped fast, just feet from the trio. It blasted them with a piercing, alert sound and snapped off a series of photos with strobe flash. The unknown man stumbled. Red shielded her face. Slug turned and bolted. Jake wheeled himself to the front of the garage. The door was already lifting, slow and deliberate. The drone hovered to his side like a sentinel. He looked out at them from the shadows inside. His voice was calm. No anger, no fear. 3 strikes. The unknown man looked at him. "You called the cops?" Jake shook his head. "Didn't need to." From the corner of the property, Carl stepped into view, rifle slung. No words. From the rooftop, Cindy's voice echoed over an outdoor speaker. "You've been identified, recorded, and geotagged." Red turned pale. Jake rolled forward 2 feet. "Go home," he said. "Whatever this is, whatever Blazer thinks he's proving, it ends here. You cross this line again, and it won't be a warning." The masked man looked like he wanted to respond, say something clever, something threatening, but the words didn't come. Not with 3 drones overhead and a veteran staring him down like he was still reading battlefield telemetry. They ran. Jake watched them go, the drones following silently, tracking, until they disappeared past the edge of the neighborhood. Then, and only then, did he breathe. Cindy's voice came over the comm again. "You think they'll come back?" Jake stared at the quiet trees beyond his property line. "No," he said. "Next time it'll be Blazer himself." The sun was just beginning to rise when Jake wheeled himself out to the edge of his porch. The street in front of his house lay silent, bathed in a soft orange glow. It looked like any normal morning in Willow Ridge. Peaceful. But Jake knew better. Last night had been the closest call yet. The vultures had sent in new blood, and they weren't just testing his defenses, they were studying them. Coordinated, tactical. That was Blazer's work. Jake had seen that strategy before, half a world away. You probe the fence before you rush it. And if Blazer was moving pieces this early in the game, it meant he was preparing for something big. Probably final. Bravo padded up beside him and leaned gently against the wheel of Jake's chair. A low, tired sigh escaped the dog's throat. Jake reached down and scratched behind his ears. "I know, buddy. We're close." Inside the garage, the largest drone, the one Jake hadn't touched in nearly a year, rested on its launch rail. He'd spent the last 48 hours upgrading it. Dual thermal cams, acoustic pulse emitters, an EMP burst rigged from repurposed power tool capacitors. It wasn't a weapon, not in the conventional sense, but it didn't need to be. Jake didn't want blood. He wanted clarity, control, and maybe, finally, closure. At 9:42 a.m., Cindy's voice came through the earpiece. No preamble, just facts. He's coming. Jake didn't ask how she knew. He just clicked once on the pad to acknowledge. 4 bikes, front, no signals, Blazers leading. Good eyes? Drone 2 and 3 are overhead. Carl's in his truck. I'm on the porch. Jake tapped another key. Activate drone 1. The drone stirred, metal arms whirring into place as the rotors hummed softly to life. Jake angled it upward, watching the monitor as it rose over the tree line, the feed sharpening into view. There they were, 4 riders, no masks this time, no games, just roaring engines, black vests, and the kind of determination that said this wasn't a bluff. This was a last stand. Blazer led the pack, his shades reflecting the clear sky, mouth twisted into something between a grin and a snarl. Behind him, Red and Slug, still nursing bruised egos, rode tight to his flanks. The 4th was new, younger, maybe trying to prove himself. They slowed just outside Jake's house, the roar of their engines simmering to a steady rumble as Blazer put a boot down on the pavement. Jake didn't wait for him to speak. He rolled to the top of the porch ramp, his drone hovering just above. "I told you not to come back," he said, voice steady. The Blazer removed his sunglasses and hung them on his collar. "Yeah, well, I don't take orders from guys in chairs." "You do today," Jake replied. Blazer scoffed. "We're not here to talk." "I figured." From the trees behind the property, Cindy's voice crackled through a loudspeaker. "This entire property is under surveillance. You make one move and the feed goes live to the county sheriff, local news, and 3 veteran support networks with a combined following of over 1.2 million. Slug shifted uneasily. The new kid swallowed hard. But Blazer didn't budge. "You think this scares me?" he called out. "You think hiding behind tech makes you strong?" Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he clicked open a folder on his display. One marked Playback. A video began to stream from the drone, projected live on the monitor mounted above Jake's porch. It was footage from the last attack. The crowbar, the taser, the paint tags. Their faces, clear and sharp. It was a statement. A warning. Blazer's jaw flexed. "I could burn this place to the ground." "You could try," Jake said, "but ask yourself, do you want to become famous for attacking a disabled veteran on live video in front of half the county?" Blazer took a step forward. "You're not better than me, McKinley." Jake rolled down the ramp slowly, the drone matching his pace in the air above. "I don't need to be," he said. "I just need to show people who you are." The silence stretched. Bravo sat next to him now, eyes locked on Blazer. And then, in a moment no one expected, Blazer pulled something from his back pocket. Not a weapon. A photo. He held it up. Jake blinked. Took a slow breath. It was a military unit. Desert backdrop. Blazer, younger, cleaner, was in the back row. "You think you're the only one who served?" Blazer said, voice lower now. "I did my time. I came back and nobody gave a damn. You think people lined up to help me? They didn't. They forgot me." Jake stared at the picture, eyes searching Blazer's face. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "It didn't matter." Blazer shoved the photo back into his jacket. "By the time I figured out how to survive, I wasn't the same. This," he gestured at his crew, "this is all I got." Jake nodded. "Then you know what war does." Blazer's shoulders dropped slightly, just slightly. "I lost brothers out there," he said. "Came back to nothing but debt, a dishonorable for punching an officer who called me expendable, and a job market that didn't care what I'd done. You think I chose this?" "No," Jake said. "I think you adapted." Blazer looked up, startled. "But you adapted to the wrong war." A long pause. Red and Slug exchanged looks. Even the younger rider looked unsure now. Jake tapped one last command. The drone above him drifted downward and slowly projected a new feed. It wasn't security footage this time. It was old video, grainy, sun-drenched clips from a memorial ceremony. Folded flags, taps played, photos of Jake's unit, and then another clip. An interview with Blazer's old unit commander. A voiceover spoke of his sacrifice, his bravery, and his discharge. "I found this last night," Jake said. "Took Cindy 10 minutes. Blazer's face tightened. "You were a good soldier," Jake continued. "You're not the enemy. You just got lost on the way back home." For a second, just once, Blazer looked like he might speak, say something meaningful, but instead he turned to his crew. "We're done here." They hesitated. "Now," he barked. Lug started his bike. Red followed. The young one looked back once before climbing on. Blazer stayed just a second longer. "You're lucky," he said. Jake shook his head. "No, I'm prepared." Blazer mounted his bike. "You ever change your mind?" Jake called after him. "The American Legion meets Thursdays. Coffee's decent, company's better." Blazer didn't answer. But he didn't laugh either. The engines roared to life. The crew pulled out, their wheels kicking up dust but not damage. No vandalism, no violence. Just departure. Jake exhaled as the drones powered down and returned to their docks. Cindy stepped out from the trees a few moments later, Carl not far behind. "You think he'll actually come?" Carl asked. Jake watched the empty street for a while. "Someday," he said. "Men like him always want to find their way home." That night the town was quiet, peaceful. Jake sat on his porch, Bravo at his feet, the stars wide above. And for the first time in a long time, the drone stayed docked. He didn't need it. Not tonight.